Tracy Harwood. So I've done a little bit of digging around and I've discovered
Ricky Grove. Fog comes in on little cat feet.
Phil Rice. This is the best film that I've seen all year and maybe ever.
Damien Valentine. Use the machinima, Luke.
Hello and welcome to And Now for Something Completely Machinima, the podcast about machinima and virtual production and related technologies. I'm one of your hosts, Phil Rice, and with me is Damien Valentine, Ricky Grove, and Tracy Harwood.
Hello.
Hey, everybody.
Hi.
Good to be back with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, glad
Great
to have you back.
This week, we are covering a film that Tracy picked for us, which came in on a recommendation from someone I think we can call a friend of the show. Tracy, why don't you tell us about it?
Absolutely, yeah. This is actually Dominski's recommendation, and it's actually his film. It's called Mission Exodus, and it's episode 3 of a trilogy that he's produced. And in the show notes, I will also put the links to episode 1 and 2. Now, we've previously reviewed one of Dominski's films called The Wanderer, which we covered in our June episode. And on that film, we commented on how much we liked the editing and also the storytelling and the beautifully crafted, complex characters, not told through voice acting, but through a music score that was a perfect accompaniment to the scenes, and also through a depth of emotion portrayed in the behavior and the context of the main characters, and you know, the way that they sort of behave in the environment. So with that in mind, I was actually very much looking forward to this particular film, and I have to say it did not disappoint me one little bit. This is actually a film that's linked to the same story world as The Wanderer, and is basically another short that demonstrates some of the very high quality storytelling chops that Dominski has. So as I said, it's part of a trilogy. I think if you watch all 3, you get more of the context, and it adds to the compelling nature of the story. Although I think I'm happy to say that you can also watch each of these 3 episodes as standalones too, which I actually think is a pretty clever thing to have achieved in itself. I will just run you through the 3 episodes, though, because ultimately what is revealed is how the intergenerational reincarnations of a scientist enables her to survive a nuclear apocalyptic event on Earth, which is ultimately the outcome of episode 3. I'm not spoiling it beyond that, but I think that will help make sense of how these things connect. Now, in episode 1, basically what you've got is a story of a woman living her life in an off-planet spaceship. The film reveals how she is experimenting with cloning, revealing evidently that she's trying to survive in space beyond her natural lifespan, or the natural lifespan of her physical body. And in such a way, her whole purpose is revealed to be one of cloning. And also survival through training her body and dietary regimen, and using this kind of handbook that's handed down from clone to clone. And in the end, there's this kind of clear sense that the ultimate aim is an attempt to return to Earth, but no real sense from watching that of exactly when that might be, except for a contents page in the book that reveals a bit more. Episode 2 starts several clones on from the previous episodes. It's a completely different story. But this one has left it too late to respawn and remove herself from the sort of the cycle of life on the spaceship. So instead, what she does is she attempts to return to Earth, basically as her body is disintegrating in the ship. And then she crash lands on Earth, presumably, walks out of the ship and sits down next to the skeletal remains of we know not whom. Then, as she's doing this next spawn emerges from the ship and takes over from her in a very clever way, kind of acknowledging the contribution that this earlier clone has made. Again, no speaking, but incredibly powerful portrayal of emotion, which you can clearly see are things like fear and sadness and death and desire. And I think it's also very evident that the thing that sort of strikes me is that you can so clearly see these emotions on these play-like characters, and I think part of it is because of the way that the music is used. In this episode, The Exodus, what we see is basically the beginning and the completion of the trilogy all in one. The film begins with this woman leaving a camp, which one assumes is the survivor of episode 2, or maybe it's many generations on of clone. It's not massively clear. She's clearly looking for something, and on her journey is joined by this kind of canine companion, with a little bit of a sense of a lassie come home type adventure to follow, I think. Of course, things quickly turn dangerous. She has to avoid this enemy robot patrolling a forest that she's passing through, and eventually she reaches a compound which is littered with the skeletal remains of former inhabitants. Now, there's no clue who these people are at this juncture, and the character is clearly kind of shocked and dismayed, but somehow seemingly compelled to explore the compound. And it's deep in the compound that the story of this woman is revealed, using the device of sort of playing back a tape in one of the labs where she finds herself. What she discovers is that she is a scientist attempting to find a formula that will enable her not just to survive this apocalyptic Holocaust type event, but also to help her companions survive. But before they can, before she can develop this formula, the compound's attacked, everyone's killed, and before she herself dies, she launches this space rocket, which is where the film ends. Now, that's kind of a circuitous way through it, but what really impressed me with this film is the quality of the storytelling. Now, when we reviewed The Wanderer, we commented basically on similar sorts of things from my memory of it. But this one has much more than that, and it's something that we've talked about before, which is how often do we see films that use a kind of a recursive plot to reveal a story? Now, in this, the recursion rests in the fact that you could actually start with any of these 3 episodes and possibly even play them all in different orders, and you would still find the story compelling.
Great observation.
I think that's a very, very masterful storytelling strategy. I have not seen that done in this way before. In this film, I think what is perhaps a little more overt than The Wanderer is the portrayal of a breadth of emotions. In episode 3, we see an attachment to an animal, which is strange because it's very clay-like. All of this is very clay-like. It's filmed in Source, so it's the way the animation works in that. It's not easy to see emotion on these characters. But what you get a sense of here is there is a clear sense of companionship with that animal, and anybody that's got a pet will understand what that is. Then we see pleasure and friendship with that animal, and then we see things like fear and disgust and sadness as she kind of goes through that environment. And finally, I'd say as she's sitting in that lab, we see something akin to what I would call understanding and realization, which is quite evident in the way that the character portrays just how she knows that she has to play those tapes in order to discover more about herself. And what's so impressive is that these are really hard emotions to portray with clarity. But I think Deminsky has certainly achieved it. It's all been done without uttering a peep. There is no voice acting in this. So I'd say the editing is really well done. There isn't really a scene I thought, oh, that doesn't really work. I think what carries it through alongside the character's complexity is also the music. And there are some interesting tells in the scenery, things like the crow indicating death, which is something I think we also commented on in The Wanderer. I think in episode 2, there's this interesting scene where the clone coming out of the ship that's sort of taking over puts its hand on the recently the recent character that's died in the, after having landed, puts her hand on the shoulder, and it's just such a gentle kind of anecdote. But it just conveys so much just by that kind of one little movement. And then in this episode, I think what's really clever is the way the flashbacks and the snapshots have been done. which I do think are very complicated as they are portrayed. And yet they still leave you with a clear sense of exactly what it is you are looking at. Um, Portraying, for example, the camaraderie between the characters, even the connection of the main character to the skeletons littered around the compound, the blood on the floor, for example. And in fact, what you see there is the differential speeds at which these snapshots are revealed, which seem to represent, I think, both the tape playing back and the memories emerging from the clone herself. And again, that's something I don't recall seeing too much of in the machinimas we've reviewed. I think it's super impressive. There's also seemingly something else which I think is quite clever when you watch all three of these, is that actually each of the clones has a slightly different personality, and each scene is very different, and each outcome, although evidently connected, is in fact entirely different from the previous iteration. I've got to say that I think is again something really impressive. I think hats off to Dominsky for that. I'm certain this guy's got a really big future, not least as an original storyteller. I'm very much looking forward to seeing more of these made. He's already indicated that he's working on some more interconnected projects. I'm really glad he sent this over to us, actually. I think from my point of view, he needs much more recognition, to be honest, because if there was ever a machinima that deserved to be made into a film in a film studio, this would be it for me. Never mind what the Backrooms is up to or any of the others. This is the story for me that deserves more attention. But that's just my thoughts. What did you guys think?
There's quite a few things that came to mind when I was watching this. As you kind of always said, there's no dialogue in this except for one moment where she goes, yes. We've talked before about machinima where there's no dialogue, and we've always been pretty impressed by it because it's hard to tell a story, but without having characters convey information to the audience or to each other. But usually those stories are fairly straightforward. They're not bad. It's easy to understand and follow on. This was easy to follow on, but it's also quite a complex situation and story.
Very.
And so yeah, and I do need to watch the other two episodes. Yeah. I do need to watch the other two episodes because I'm intrigued by the idea that you can watch all three episodes in any order and still get the same experience, or still know the same story. Because on top of no dialogue and still telling a complex story, having that on top of it as well is also very impressive. So I need to sit down and watch the other two. So yeah, I'm very blown away by this director's storytelling. The other thing I looked at is his channel, and he's using Source Filmmaker for this and his other work. And we talked before, that's a very complicated piece of software. It takes a lot of time and effort to pull something off. He managed to put something out almost every month. So this is a guy he's got the talent and the dedication to be able to do that, which is something I hugely admire. And there was something else I was going to say that's completely gone out of my head now. Yeah, I'm going to have to come back to that when I think of it. Probably after we finish recording the episode.
Yes.
But yeah, this is an excellent pick, Tracy. Definitely my favorite of the month because it's just so much craft has gone into pulling this story, pulling this film off. So yeah, I'm really intrigued to see what he does next, and I hope he has a good career, telling stories because it's obviously something he's really good at and has a strong passion for it. So we'll be keeping a close eye on him.
Ricky, you want to go next, or you want me to?
Sure, I'll go ahead. There's little I could say that Tracy already hasn't said. All I can add is that cloning technology is a strong theme in many classic science fiction works. And I believe this filmmaker has either read those works or seen films like them and has taken some ideas from them because there's a certain familiarity. The ethical problem with it from a personal point of view, cloning yourself, and are you responsible for your clone or is your clone responsible for you is a big issue in it. The complications of a clone in society. Now, it was very smart of this director to put the story in a world in which the clone wasn't in society, but in an interrupted society, a society that was broken, and that the goal was to extend one's life or one's ability to be able to contribute to to the world. So I was very impressed with that. Source Filmmaker is a little less intimidating than now for me than it was when I first looked at it, but there is a very steep learning curve. However, once you get past that curve, just like any really good program, it allows you to operate quickly and to come up with iterations of ideas. So I think that's what this filmmaker has done. They've worked hard to be able to build their skills in Source Filmmaker. A couple things about the film. You mentioned the clay-like look on the faces. That's because the Source Filmmaker doesn't have something called subsurface scattering, which is how light enters your skin and doesn't bounce off. Well, some of it bounces off, but some of it actually goes inside of your skin. It's subsurface, and it gives the skin a kind of realistic texture or a quality, a three-dimensional quality is missing in the original Source Filmmaker, which is why you see them as clay figures, which makes it even more impressive that he was able to bring out emotion from those faces. Now, there's some work you could do in Face Poser, which is a separate program inside of Source Filmmaker that you could pull up and do facial expressions. Didn't do too much of that, I don't think, but there was some. But the thing, the fascinating thing is that it's the story and the music to some extent that allows the viewer to assume there are emotions, certain emotions in the character, without necessarily having the character fully express those, like an actor in a realistic movie. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And the ability to do that is highly skilled. Highly skilled. So I agree with you wholeheartedly, Tracy. The storytelling skill is just remarkable. If I had an issue with it, it was that it maybe it's a matter of personal taste, but I find overly orchestral soundtracks for simple stories to be a distraction for me personally. Now, I know that isn't the case for the great majority of people, because obviously they love this movie and you love it and you didn't have any problem, and I respect your opinion and your approach. But sometimes that over orchestration was too obvious for me, and I wanted to see a simpler approach to music sometimes in it. But again, that's personal taste. But overall, I just love this movie. I thought it was just terrific. I want to see more by this filmmaker. I want everybody to watch these three films. They're smart. They're well made. They're well crafted. They have something important to say about a topic that, although isn't active in our current technology, will be in the future. So it's perfect science fiction. It's an outstanding pick, and it was my favorite of the month as well.
Yeah, it's world-class storytelling here, really, truly. I had the same thought that you did, Tracy, of I could totally see this being made as a good budget conventional film, feature length. My intrepidation there would be that I have every faith in Hollywood's ability to ruin it.
Yes.
Well, Kim Kardashian would be a good choice for the lead.
Right. Yeah. It's one of those things where it is what Deminsky has achieved here is so precious that I would be terrified to give it over to a big production committee. It would just, I'm glad it exists where it is.
Yeah.
If he, if that happens, I'll be happy for Deminsky for one reason, that will pay his bills for a while, right? But I won't necessarily be optimistic about what they'll turn it into. This is too good to be messed with, I think. Recursion stories are very interesting, and they're, there are instances in Hollywood where that notion is played with. To varying degrees of success. It could be argued that the relationship between The Godfather and The Godfather Part 2, that there's, The Godfather Part 2 to some degree tells the pre-story and concludes the original story, but it's not really, it's just cutting back and forth between time periods, right?
Right.
This is more of a true recursion.
Right.
The
Right.
snake's head is right there at the tail, right?
Yeah.
So this is something different. I think a great example of someone thinking of this, let's say, Mobius strip kind of idea of a story and having like a Dionysian revel with it is the movie Predestination, which stars Ethan Hawke.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the actress that's in it, but I mean it's quite a yarn. But of course the device there is it's time travel, and it's not just recursive, it's all interwoven, and I don't want to spoil it. If you love that kind of plot, if you love a mind bender of a plot and wow moments and things like that, go watch it. It's worth it. But it's like so convoluted and so complex and paradoxical is more the emphasis in that movie's thread. So that's one way of messing with it. And then you've got something like, well, Tarantino in his earlier films, Pulp Fiction most notably, would cut around to different times and tell things in a different order than the actual sequence. And he did it very artfully in many ways. But for him, it was all about, I want to control the flow of information to you, the viewer. And the best way to do that is to tell things out of order to increase dramatic impact. And his stuff's been analyzed to death. I mean, some people like the outcome of that, some people don't. And I don't think either one is wrong. But that's another way of doing it. But again, it's a device. It's a device that's like, behind the fourth wall kind of happening, of cutting it up. Here, the recursion is all within the story and within the way that it's told.
Yes.
Where you, and it's really hard to do this. I don't know if it's just so hard to do this well. It's really hard. So it's just just brilliantly executed. And I think the biggest challenge of Deminsky that he faced was in this final chapter, the fact that they're clones, so they look alike essentially, right? And yet without any subtitles or title cards or any dialogue to clue you in, no noticeable change in the color correction. Those are devices that are used when you're switching between time periods. You'll notice it in films that this film has kind of a golden hue
color
to
gradient.
It. This has, grading. No use of that. He didn't cheat. Did it just with the story. And I think maybe the only thing that made it evident was an outfit change. As far as, okay, so initially you see the character looking at the video monitor, but then sometimes it just cuts to those scenes of stuff happening. And I never, ever, ever felt disoriented. I never asked myself, well, gee, now is this in the past or is this in the present? Which I never asked that. And it's not because I'm super smart. That's not why. It's because he did it really well.
Sure did.
I just last night or the night before caught a movie that's still on Netflix. This is going to seem totally non sequitur, but I promise it's not. It's called Widow Clicquot, and it's the story of the woman who ultimately took over the winery or the vineyards and founded the Clicquot brand of champagne that's still around today. It's very highly regarded, right? It's called Widow Clicquot, 2023 movie, wonderfully done. Wonderful movie. And that movie interplays with stuff that's happening in the present when she's the widow, and her memories, right, in the same space and everything, her memories of before her husband passed. No subtitles, no title cards, no color grading differences. It just switches. And that wasn't nearly as successful at preventing disorientation as Deminsky's film was.
Yeah.
But it's pretty well done. Like and one of the cues was apparel, because it's the same woman and it's not that long ago. So like it was really a challenge. And this is a professional filmmaker that did it. And I don't think that they succeeded with that approach of overlap in the way that Deminsky did. So this is really exceptional stuff. I realize I'm not even talking at all about the craft of the execution of the actual film. You guys have addressed all of that, I think, and it is. I mean, it's great. There's lots to admire there. But what really struck me about this was the craft that went on before he opened up Source Filmmaker. It's so evident. There's so much work and thought and careful planning that went into the craft of this story. And that would have been true whether Deminsky was going to release it as a novel or a short story or as he did. That work would have been the same. It's this stuff has to fit together in a way that makes sense. And then he ties a hand behind his back, right? I'm gonna help you understand this quite complex story with no one speaking a word, really.
No one explaining anything.
No one explaining.
No info dump.
No on-screen text, no exposition, nothing. Just visually, I'm going to tell, and let's give some credit to the sound and the music, like it or not.
Yes.
He used that to help shape the narrative, to help you know.
Indeed.
In traditional movies, it's kind of annoying sometimes when the score is so obviously telling you what to feel. It's really annoying once you've watched a lot of movies. It's like it feels manipulative. In this case, though, you can't begrudge him. He's got to use that tool. Yes, I agree, Ricky, that the style of music, I can hear something different that would work well for this too. That's a little bit more minimalist, a little bit simpler, something more of like I love what Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross have been doing on film soundtracks in the past decade or more.
Yeah,
where it's not orchestral.
One or two instruments coming together with sort of suspended quality. Yeah,
that's a matter of taste, like you said, and but I lean that way as well. But the music was used effectively,
very effectively,
because one of the key tools, let's say two of the key tools, no on-screen prompts and no spoken dialogue. Man, oh man, and you're right, Damien. You mentioned that this is it's one thing to do that with a simple story or with a story that maybe falls into a certain cliche. And so you're just going to get it. You know, you're kind of riding along with, I've seen this archetype of story before. This doesn't have that really. Yes, it borrows from the science fiction traditions with regard to cloning and even space travel to some degree. It definitely does. It's nested within that, you know, but there is a originality that comes out of this,
and
that goes to show you absolutely originality doesn't have to mean every single thing is brand new. Frankly, that's probably impossible. You know, if Voltaire said that, then I think now it's even more so, right? So. Yeah, I could go on and on, but it's just. Man, oh man, it is such a pleasure.
Such a pleasure, yeah.
To see such skill displayed, and knowing what we know about Deminsky, and he's not at all arrogant about it. You know, he's confident but not boastful. Seems a very humble person, and just loves what he's doing, and the love comes through. You know, in the making of this. So. Yeah, wonderful. I will absolutely for certain watch all three parts of this again, at least one more time. I mean, it's one of those types of stories that, especially, it's one of those that, like, as soon as you finished it, you're like, now I want to go back and see.
Right.
Because now that I know where it ended, it changes how I'll view the beginning, and it doesn't hurt it. It actually helps it. There's few movies that do that. You know, The Sixth Sense is the one that I think of the most, right? Where after you've seen that surprise ending of Chalamet's The Sixth Sense, then you want to go see it again because, okay,
I want to watch it again, yeah.
Was this obvious all along and I'm just stupid or what?
Yeah,
you know? So it's this isn't so much a mystery as that one is, but it really is just about the craft and about the way that it does fit together.
Hollywood has inured us in many ways to the combination of stories with ideas and stories just for entertainment. And I think they've made that a hard thing to put together because of the Hollywood idea that ideas don't equal profit, you know? And I just think that is so narrow-minded, and you're
wrong.
right.
I think it's wrong.
I think it's wrong too. I think stories with ideas, especially ideas, as you say, that make so much sense, that are so clearly told, as Tracy so well pointed out, they're even more entertaining. And they have that sense, like you said, of wanting to go back and re-experience it. That's a rare thing that you don't find.
They have enduring value as
yes,
well.
They do.
Like if you look at when people point back to old films that you still refer to and reference today, they had that. They had something injected in them that was more than just fluff entertainment.
Right.
The fluff entertainment movies they're just forgotten. You know, you might stumble across them on Tubi and go, "Oh, I remember that was fun. Let's watch that again." But they don't live here rent free like a story like this.
Well, it's like the difference of grabbing a Taco Bell and stepping into a 4-star diner, you know?
Yes.
A 4-star restaurant. You're being given something that's been carefully conceived, carefully executed, and carefully presented to you. You know, and that's what this person does. And I urge this director, Daminsky, to make more movies. And I urge all of you watching or listening to this podcast to go watch these movies and subscribe to their channel.
Great comments. Thank you. And thank you so much to Daminsky for bringing it to our attention. It was a delight to have it on the show.
It looks like you're actually in one of the spacecraft that was used in the film, Tracy.
Exactly.
But there's a Christmas tree that is oddly there.
It's Christmas. It's December. That's the...
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, audience, what did you think of what we had to say here? Have you seen it? If so, I would say I'm gonna request something a little unusual. If you have an interesting comment about this film, do not comment on our podcast. Go comment on Daminsky's film.
Here.
Because this really does need more attention, more eyes on it, and that helps the algorithm for
yes.
him. Without filmmakers like this, we would quickly run out of gas to make this show, trying to find good content. So it's just wonderful. Our hats off to you. I'm the only one wearing a hat, but it's still on. But for the metaphor's botched, but you get the idea.
Yeah,
right. So
just keep talking.
I'm Phil Rice. On behalf of my co-hosts, Damien Valentine, Ricky Grove, and Tracy Harwood, we bid you good day, and thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.